apprentice, Darth Ball. He will find your lost ship.
Rated M for mature.
Here we go! Oh my god! Oh jeez! Oh my god! Oh, I love you! This is going to be easy.
What about the droid attack on the Wookiees?
Why you bully me?
What about the droid attack on the Wookiees? What about the droid attack on the Wookiees?
He needs some milk! Hey, hey, hey! Chill, chill!
Wait a minute! Who are you?
I am Iron Man.
Finish him!
Yeah, boy.
You underestimate my power!
This is where the fun begins.
This deal's getting worse all the time.
For the heavyweight championship, let's get ready to rumble!
Oh, I don't think so.
Get your ass back here, boy!
KO! Let's do this.
What is up, guys? So today for this video we're gonna take a look at BB9E, other known name as Darth Ball. So for this hero guide, guys, we're going to be taking a look at BB9E and we're going to be going over his abilities. We're going to be talking his star cards and the one that I use and why I think they're more beneficial to BB9E to maximize his full potential. I'm going to be sharing some tips and tricks for you guys as well so that you guys can master Darth Ball whenever you guys are playing game modes like Heroes vs Villains and also Galactic Assault, as they are very different game modes. BB9E is a fun character to play, and one thing I know a lot of people have actually been requesting about him is that they want to know exactly how to play him in regards to actually gain good kill streaks in bigger game modes such as Supremacy and also Galactic Assault. Other people I know, they do want to understand how his abilities actually work, like what star cards to use, and also like how you can actually maximize his full potential, because BB9E, he's not really a character that you would rush to get quickly, if that makes sense. Let's just say you're playing Heroes vs Villains as an example. BB9E isn't going to be your first choice. If you're playing Galactic Assault, it's not going to be your first choice either for a hero available. So one thing with BB9E, like I mentioned, he's a fun character to play, and he does have some really good abilities in regards to actually maximizing his potential as a support character. His abilities, they work very well with other saber wielders characters, especially like as an example, let's just use Darth Vader as an example. So let's just say BB9E is attacking someone with his basic attack, and just a quick tip for you guys as well, every time BB9E attacks with his basic attack, every 5 seconds he is going to stun the opponent. So this is one thing that actually makes BB9E really good as well, because he actually stuns his opponents every 5 seconds whenever you attack them normally. So pair this up with someone who is using like choke or freeze. This is actually really good, as you're actually able to do a lot of damage to your opponents based on you always freezing them. So without further ado, we're going to jump into the star cards and then we're going to start off this video. So jumping straight into the star cards, you guys can see on screen the star cards that I use, and I'm going to be explaining in another clip as to why I use these specific star cards compared to the other ones that BB9E has. As I mentioned, BB9E, he's a support character, but at the same time, if you do know how to play BB9E, you actually can rack up a lot of kills with him, especially in bigger game modes like Galactic Assault and also Supremacy. So I'm going to be explaining these star cards and the benefits of them, also showcasing some gameplay in Galactic Assault so that you guys can understand why these star cards are beneficial to BB9E actually surviving as long as he can. So the first star card that I use is called Faster. And the benefits of the star card is it actually amplifies BB9E's middle ability, which is his shock spin ability. In most scenarios, whenever I use BB9E, especially on a game mode like Galactic Assault as I'm playing on right now, whenever you use the middle ability, it's going to leave BB8 stationary, so he's going to be still on the floor and he's going to start spinning around and he's going to be like shooting like electricity out of his body, kind of like a mini Palpatine in a way. However, like I mentioned, the benefits of this star card is for every enemy hit, so there's a maximum of 5 enemies per total, so it goes 2 to 3 to 4 to 5, and then it is going to double the damage of this ability for each enemy hit. So in most scenarios for this star card to work, you need to hit a minimum of 2 players, and then the damage is going to be doubled for the duration of this ability. In most scenarios, whenever you're playing Galactic Assault, you're always going to be really close to your opponents, and in more situations, your opponent's always going to be clustered up. So there might be a group of 2 enemies, 3 enemies, 4, 6, it all depends really. So the benefits of the star card, like I mentioned, the damage is going to increase for your shock spin ability when you hit a minimum of 2 opponents. So in most scenarios, whenever you're playing Galactic Assault, like I mentioned, you always want to make sure before you use his middle ability, find a group of enemies so that you can actually use it. Therefore, the star card is going to enhance your damage for your middle ability, and in most scenarios you'll actually be able to one-shot opponents based on how many opponents are actually within range of your middle ability. So let's just say, as an example, 5 enemies are all clustered up. If you use his shock spin ability, you are going to actually one-shot those opponents other than heavies, especially if they're overhealed as well. So this ability and this star card as well, they go very well with each other, and it's also really good to have these two lined up one after the other. Another good thing about BB9E's middle ability is that whenever you use it, especially if you're going up against a blaster character, it is going to overheat their blasters for a short duration of time while you're using this ability. So in a scenario where, let's say, 3 enemies are all clustered up together, you go in, you use your shock spin ability, you have the star card so that your damage gets tripled, and also you're going to overheat their blaster so they won't be able to actually shoot at you while the animation for BB9E's shock spin ability is actually going on. So this is kind of like a win-win in more scenarios. The next star card that I use is called Spin Me Round, and the benefits of this star card is when enemies are hit by BB9E's shock spin ability, they are going to be pushed away from you 4 meters further. However, the downside of this star card is the cooldown for BB9E's middle ability is increased by 3 seconds when you have the star card at epic, which I do. So in most scenarios, whenever you use BB9E's middle ability, if you went up against a blaster character or a saber character and they are blocking or they haven't dashed when you have used this ability, it is going to send them flying, and in most scenarios it's actually really funny to see your opponents just fly away from you. Let's just say on maps like Kashyyyk, maybe Naboo, maybe Bespin, whenever you go behind your opponents or even in front of them, if they are blocking as an example, and you use his middle ability, not only is it going to do damage to them, but it's also going to send them flying. So in most scenarios you can send them flying over cliffs and rails, and it's really funny sometimes to watch your opponents just fly away from you. However, apart from actually sending your opponents flying from you, this is actually a really good opener as well, because let's just say you're going up against a group of enemies and you're in a tight spot and you just want to create some distance between yourself and your opponents. Maybe you are really low on HP and you just want to regenerate your health for a quick second. If you use the middle ability, it's also going to push your opponents away from you, and this can actually allow you to create some distance between you and your opponent. So let's just say you're going up against a saber wielder and that saber wielder is constantly applying pressure to you to the point where you're really low on HP, and all they need is just a couple more hits to actually defeat you. Well, if you use the middle ability, it is going to send them flying, especially if they aren't blocking at the time when you use this ability, and it's actually going to allow you to create some space, maybe run away for a little while, regain some health so that your health regen can actually generate, or you can then plan what your next decision is, whether you want to attack your opponent or you want to just run away to where your teammates are so that you can actually regain some health, and also make sure that you're in a safe position so that you can actually go in and decide what your next play is going to be. And the final star card I use is called Link Systems. And the reason why I use the star card is because for every 4 successful enemy stuns, BB9E's basic attack is going to increase by 1 to a maximum up to 8. So as an example, let's just say you're going up against a saber wielder. Saber wielders are very tanky and they have lots of health. If you get 4 stuns on your opponent, your damage is going to increase all the way up to 8 as a maximum. So on top of BB9E's damage already for his basic attack, you'll actually be able to increase his damage up by 8, and this actually allows you to do way more damage to your opponents in a lot of scenarios as well. So alongside BB9E's basic attack, as I mentioned earlier in the video, every time you attack your opponent for every 5 seconds, for within the time period, you're going to stun your opponent. This is actually really good, because let's just say as an example, you're going up against a bunch of enemies and they're all clustered up together. Whether you use your middle ability so that you push them away or defeat them, depending on how much they are within the radius of your shock spin ability, you can then finish them up with just your basic attack, because for every 5 seconds between you using your basic attack, you're going to stun your opponents, and this actually just leaves them in place so that you can either dash behind them, dash to the side of them, maybe jump over them depending on the height of the opponent that you're going up against, and this actually allows you to like do continuous damage to your opponents, which is actually really good, especially when you're going up against a bunch of enemies or one saber character as an example, because saber characters, they're way more tankier compared to blaster characters. So you want to make sure that you're actually attacking your opponents as much as possible. So whether you're going up against a saber character in Heroes vs Villains or even in Galactic Assault, I'd always recommend like trying to apply pressure to your opponent, because you want to make sure that you attack them so that you can either stun them, so that you can actually do some damage to them while they're stunned, and then if you have the star card equipped, you then want to increase your damage output as well on your basic attack. So not only will you be stunning your opponents every 5 seconds when you attack them, but you'll also have an increase to your basic attack damage as well. So this is really good in actually allowing you to actually defeat your enemies really quickly as BB9E. In most scenarios as well, whenever you actually stun your opponents, it actually leaves them wide open for your teammates to actually do damage to them as well. So let's just say you're playing Galactic Assault, as I'm doing right now, and let's just say you're going up against an opponent, maybe a blaster character or a saber character, and they are stunned. Your teammates will actually be able to do damage to them because they'll be stuck in the stun animation for 5 seconds, and then when they get out of it, if you keep applying pressure to your opponents, then you'll actually be able to stun them again, and therefore the cycle just continuously repeats. So you actually increase your damage, which is obviously really good, and your teammates also can finish up where you started in regards to doing damage to the character that you're dealing damage to as well. So here's a few tips and tricks for you guys whenever you're playing as BB9E, or Darth Ball as we should call him for the rest of this video. So alongside BB9E's basic attack as he actually stuns opponents, one good thing I'd also recommend as well whenever you're playing Heroes vs Villains or even Galactic Assault, when you're actually going up against your opponents, one good thing about BB9E, and one thing I'd also recommend as well, is maximize his stun ability on his basic attack by all means possible. Don't try to run away from your opponents to a point where you actually can't do damage to them. You want to make sure that you're up in your opponent's faces so that you can do damage to them continuously, because every 5 seconds, like I mentioned, you're going to stun your opponents, and this actually allows you to do damage to them. And another good thing as well, BB9E, his hitbox is really tiny, kind of like Yoda's and also BB8's, so you want to make sure that you use his size to his advantage. In most scenarios, whenever you're going up against a saber character as an example, they're always going to try to rush at you or dash at you or pull you or anything like that so that they can actually get close to you. However, BB9E's basic attack, because you can actually stun your opponents, it actually gives you some space so that you can actually do damage to your opponents. You can then dash back, and then they'll be stuck in the stun animation, and then you can do damage to them while you're actually within range of them, and this will actually allow you to then capitalize on them losing HP, which is actually really good as well. So whenever you're using his middle ability as well, I'd also recommend don't actually let the ability play out. In most scenarios, when you actually use this ability, sometimes I actually find it better to actually use this ability whether to push your opponents away from you or you can actually overheat their blasters and then finish up with your basic attack. A lot of people, especially when I see in Galactic Assault where they normally do BB9E, and I consider they're new players as well, they would actually just use BB9E's middle ability, and because you're stuck in the animation where you're just spinning around shooting lightning at your opponents and everything, this actually just leaves you wide open, because if you're going up against a saber character as an example and you're stuck in this animation, they can still do damage to you and you won't actually be able to do enough damage to your opponent to then defeat them. So you'll just be stuck in the animation, they'll be able to do damage to you, and then that's just going to result in you dying really quickly. So one tip I'd actually recommend for you guys as well when you're using BB9E and his build ability, let's just say you're going up against a blaster character as an example, I would highly recommend using his middle ability so that you can either push your opponent away from you, and you can also then overheat their blaster so that they actually can't fire at you for a short duration of time. So this is actually really good. And also when you do that, make sure you rush into your opponent and then follow up with a couple hits from your basic attack. I'd highly recommend dashing as well, and you need to actually learn to get the dashes down whenever it comes to playing BB9E, because he has 2 dashes by default, and in most scenarios whenever I play BB9E, I always like to dash away from my opponent, dash in, dash out. I try to jump over them. I also try to dash to the side of them so that I can actually leave them wide open, because when they do a swing animation, it's going to leave them open for a short duration of time for me to either stun them or for me to actually do damage to them. And this is how I said use BB9E's his size to his advantage. So you want to make sure that you go up against your opponents, and whenever you try to dash behind them, follow up with a couple hits from your basic attack, which will most likely stun them, especially if the 5-second period is not over yet, and then you'll be able to actually do damage to them as well. BB9E, he's a supportive character like I mentioned, and he does actually heal your teammates back to full health for a period of time. In most scenarios, passively, he has this ability where he can actually regen his teammates' health. So let's just say your teammates are low on HP. When this passive ability actually kicks in, if they're within range of you, you will actually start to heal them as well, which is actually pretty cool as well. So this actually allows BB9E to fit within that support role. So another tip for you guys whenever it comes to using BB9E, especially with his right ability, what this does is it actually allows you and your opponents to actually get unlimited cooling. So for you as an example, you'll actually be able to actually fire off your basic attack without having your stamina drained, and if your teammates are blaster characters, it actually allows them to actually fire their blasters without their stamina being drained as well for a short duration of time once your ability is actually active while you're actually using it. And another good thing as well, it actually recharges your opponent's abilities back. So whenever you're playing heroes versus villains as an example, especially when you're within range of your teammates, it'll actually begin a much quicker cooldown for your teammates so that the abilities can come back. So let's just say you have, I don't know, maybe Vader, you've got Kylo, you've got Darth Ball with you. When you use this right ability, it is actually going to allow your friends or your teammates' abilities to come back much quicker than it normally would, because the cooldown is going to be decreased. And when you're using BB9E's smoke ability, it's kind of really situationally useful, I say. It does allow you to actually see where enemies are on the map, which is actually really good. So in more scenarios, you can then plan out where your opponents are, and then you can actually go and rush towards them. And also what it actually does, it actually disrupts your enemy's radar. So what it actually does is whenever you use the smoke ability, not only do you see where your opponents are, but it also disrupts their radar so that they actually have mixed signals at where you actually are. So in most scenarios, it will actually show your opponent's radar that you're actually in one place, but in reality you'll be in another spot as well. So this is actually really good to actually start off with. So you confuse your enemies so that they actually don't know where you actually are. You'll be zipping in and out, you'll be dashing left and right so that you can do damage to your opponents, and they'll be so confused at where you actually are. By the time they actually realize fully, you'll actually be able to either do damage to them to the point where you can actually get rid of them, or they've already been defeated by yourself or your teammates as well. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this BB9E hero guide. I know a lot of you guys have actually been asking how to play BB9E, and also how his abilities work and how you can actually pair up star cards so that you can actually maximize his potential. Because BB9E, like I mentioned, he is fun to play. He's kind of like a mini Palpatine in a way, and there's a lot of memes about him right now. So I know a lot of people, they do enjoy playing as him because he is really fun to play as. So do drop a like on the video, guys, if you have enjoyed it. If you're new to the channel as well, do hit that subscribe button as well. And I hope to see more of you Darth Balls on the BattleFront. Take care, everyone.